The boy had been running for 11 hours when he made the worst decision of his life, and the only one that might keep him alive. He ran toward the bikers, 16 years old, ribs showing through a torn shirt, one eye swollen half shut, boots held together with electrical tape. And behind him, somewhere in the white shimmer of the Arizona heat, men with guns and patience and absolutely no reason to let him reach morning. The iron vultures hadn't come looking for a war that afternoon. They'd come for coffee, gasoline, and the kind of silence that only exists between men who've already buried too many brothers. What they found instead was a boy standing in the middle of the parking lot, chest heaving, pointing at the overpass above the highway with a shaking hand. "You're all in danger." Nobody laughed harder than Silas Mercer. If this story already has you gripping your seat, hit subscribe right now because every week we drop stories like this one, raw, cinematic, and built to keep you up at night. Tap the like button and drop a comment telling us what city or country you're watching from. We want to see how far this story travels. Now let's ride. The Red Mesa truck stop sat 40 miles east of nowhere, wedged between two dying towns that had given up arguing about which one was worse off. 3 diesel pumps. A diner that smelled like burnt grease and somebody else's regret. A parking lot cracked open by years of summer heat, the asphalt splitting apart in long, dark seams like something underneath was trying to get out. It was the kind of place you stopped because you had to, not because you wanted to. The Iron Vultures rolled in at 2:30 in the afternoon, 14 bikes in loose formation, the rumble of their engines arriving a full 30 seconds before they did. The sound traveled across the flatlands like weather, low and inevitable and impossible to ignore. Inside the diner, a trucker looked up from his phone. A waitress with tired eyes moved to the window. A couple with Kansas plates and a minivan full of kids instinctively reached for each other's hands without knowing why. The bikes pulled through the lot in a slow arc and shut down one by one, the engines going quiet in a ragged sequence that sounded almost like a conversation ending. 14 men swung off their machines with the particular economy of movement that comes from years in the saddle. No wasted motion, no performance of it. They just finished 4 hours of riding through triple-digit heat for a veterans charity event 2 counties west, and every one of them carried the weight of it in their shoulders, in the way they rolled their necks, in the silence that moved between them like a shared language. Silas Mercer was the last to dismount. He was 43 years old and built like something that had been broken and healed wrong and broken again and just kept going anyway. 6'1", with hands that looked like they'd been used as tools for most of their existence. A scar ran from his left jawline to just below his ear, old enough to have faded to silver, new enough that he still noticed it in mirrors on certain mornings. His cut, the leather vest of the Iron Vulture's MC, was so worn it had taken on the texture of a second skin. Road Captain Patch on the right, 12 years of road in every crease. They called him Grim. Not because he was humorless, exactly the opposite, actually. Silas Mercer laughed the way some men drink, often, easily, and sometimes at things that probably shouldn't be funny. He laughed at close calls and bad weather and the particular absurdity of the world that kept throwing its worst at a group of men who'd already seen worse. His laugh was the first thing most people heard, and the thing they remembered longest. He pushed his sunglasses up onto his forehead and looked at the diner with the expression of a man conducting a brief negotiation with his own reluctance. "Coffee's going to be terrible," he said to no one in particular. "Always is," said the man beside him. That was Decker. Real name Wendell Decker. Which explained why nobody called him Wendell. He was the club's sergeant-at-arms, a year older than Grim and 20 pounds heavier, with a gray beard and the permanent squint of a man who'd spent too many years looking into wind. He and Grim had been riding together since before either of them could have told you exactly why. Some partnerships don't have a clean origin story. They just exist, like geography. The group moved toward the diner in the loose cluster of men who don't need to be told to stay together. A few broke off toward the pumps. One, a younger member named Tuck, barely 26, still carrying the particular alertness of someone who hadn't yet learned how to let his guard down, went to check the tire pressure on his rear wheel, which he'd been worrying about since Flagstaff. Grim held the diner door open and looked back across the lot for no particular reason. That was when he saw the boy. He He was coming from the east side of the property, from behind the row of semi-trucks that sat idle along the chain-link fence. His gait was wrong, not the walk of someone heading somewhere, but the stagger of someone who had been heading somewhere for so long that the destination had stopped mattering, and all that remained was the motion itself. He was young, 16 maybe. Could have been younger if the bruising hadn't aged him. He was wearing a gray t-shirt with a long tear across the shoulder, jeans that had been through something. One boot had the toe pulling away from the sole, and he'd wrapped it with a strip of what looked like black electrical tape. His left eye was swollen in the particular way that takes a day or two to achieve. Dark at the socket, puffy in the lid, the kind of thing that doesn't happen from one punch, but from a sustained effort. He was looking straight at the iron vultures, not at the diner, not at the pumps, at the bikes, and at the men who'd been riding them. Grim let the door swing shut behind him. The boy crossed the last 30 feet of cracked asphalt at a pace that kept threatening to become a run without quite getting there, like he was fighting the instinct that was telling him to sprint because some other instinct was telling him that running might get him shot. He stopped 12 feet away and stood there breathing hard, his chest working visibly under the torn shirt, and looked at Grim with an expression that lived somewhere between terror and the particular exhausted relief of someone who has finally, after a very long time, run out of other options. "You're all in danger," he said. His voice cracked on the last word. He was still a kid underneath everything the last 24 hours had done to him. Grim looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Decker, who had come back out of the diner behind him. Then he looked back at the boy, and he laughed. It wasn't cruel. It was the genuine, surprised laugh of a man who'd been warned about a lot of things in his life. Incoming fire, structural failure, federal investigations, the variable reliability of certain transmission components, and had learned that the universe had a sense of humor about the delivery mechanism. A 16-year-old with electrical tape on his boot, telling 14 bikers they were in danger. "Kid," Grim said when the laugh had settled, "I appreciate the heads up." "I'm serious." The boy's voice steadied. Something in his eyes went flat and very old. "There are men with guns in the freight depot, above the overpass. The one you're going to cross when you leave." Decker made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. A few of the others who'd come back out of the diner stood with coffee cups halfway raised, watching with the particular attention men develop when they've learned that the strangest warnings sometimes come from the strangest directions. But mostly, they were watching Grim, because that's what you did. You watched Grim. "What's your name?" Grim said. "Noah." "Noah." He said it straight, without inflection. "How old are you?" 16. "Where are you from?" A pause. The boy, Noah, looked away towards the eastern fence line, then back. "I was from Tucson, before." The before landed in the air between them like something dropped from a height. Grim studied him for another 3 seconds. The eye, the tape on the boot, the way the boy's right hand kept wanting to reach for something that wasn't there. A phone, maybe, or a door handle, or someone's arm. The body language of a person who had spent recent time having things taken away from him. "Someone hit you," Grim said. It wasn't a question. "A lot of people hit me," Noah said. "That's not the point. The point is, when did you eat last?" The question knocked the boy sideways. He blinked. "What?" "Food. When?" Noah's jaw tightened. He was trying to keep the conversation where he needed it, and Grim had just casually relocated it. "Yesterday. Maybe the day before. It doesn't matter." "Tuck." Grim didn't raise his voice. Tuck appeared in the diner doorway. "Yeah." "Go get a sandwich and a Gatorade." He paused. "Get 2 sandwiches." Noah stared at him with an expression of profound frustration. "I'm trying to tell you something." "I know you are," Grim said quietly. "And I'm going to listen to every word. But you're going to eat first. Because I've found that people tell better stories when they're not about to pass out." Something in Noah's face broke open for just a moment. A flinch of something raw and unwanted. The kind of expression that happens when someone does something unexpectedly kind to a person who has forgotten what that feels like. He covered it fast. Looked down at his boot. Nodded once. They stood in the partial shade of the diner overhang while Tuck brought food, and Noah ate with the focused urgency of someone who'd been pretending for too long that he wasn't hungry. Grim leaned against the building and watched the highway and didn't push. The rest of the club filtered in and out of the diner, keeping an ambient distance. Decker settled near the door with his coffee and said nothing, which was his particular way of paying attention. When the first sandwich was gone, Noah started talking. He'd been at the Red Mesa truck stop for 4 hours before the bikers arrived. He'd come across the desert on foot, not the road, the actual desert, through scrub brush and dry wash channels, because the road had a white SUV on it that had been pacing him since dawn. He'd spent the last 11 hours moving. Before that, 2 nights in an irrigation culvert east of the junction, surviving on gas station food he'd bought with the last of the cash he had, watching the road and listening. "Where were you before the culvert?" Grim asked. Noah was quiet for a moment. "Inside," he said. "With them." "With who?" Another pause. Longer. He picked up the second sandwich but didn't open it yet. "There's a group. They don't have a name, not one they use out loud. They move things. Mostly, they move information. Evidence. Proof of things that certain people pay a great deal of money to make disappear." Grim kept his face neutral. "What kind of things?" "The kind of things that end careers and companies and people." Noah looked down at the sandwich. "My brother worked for them. Not because he wanted to, because they made him an offer that wasn't actually an offer. You understand that?" "Yeah," Grim said. "I understand that." "He was inside for 2 years. He told me once, just once, and he was careful even then, that he was building something, collecting things, files, records, proof of everything they'd done, everything they were going to do." Noah finally opened the sandwich. 3 months ago, he stopped answering his phone. The sentence landed with the particular weight of things that don't need further explanation. Grim felt something shift in the air. Not quite dread. He'd been around dread long enough that he could categorize it accurately. This was its quieter cousin, the recognition of a shape you've seen before. "What happened to him?" "They said it was a car accident." Noah's voice was completely flat. "On a road he never drove. In a town where nobody knew him. And his phone was gone, and his laptop was gone, and every piece of anything he'd ever touched was gone. Except..." He stopped. "Except what?" "Except what he sent me. Before." Noah tapped the side of his head. "Nothing digital, nothing they could take. He made me memorize it. An address, a set of numbers, a sequence, in case." He looked up at Grim for the first time with something other than urgency in his eyes, something older and sadder. "He knew what they were going to do to him, and he sent me a lifeline I didn't know I was holding until it was too late to give it back." The highway stretched out beyond the lot in the white afternoon heat, empty and shimmering. A distant truck moved along it like a bead on a wire. Grim had spent enough years reading the space between what people said and what they meant to know that the boy in front of him was not performing anything. There was no theater in the way he carried this. It had the specific texture of something a person had been holding alone for a long time, compressed into a shape that fit nowhere, too heavy to put down, too dangerous to share. "And the freight depot," Grim said. Noah nodded towards the highway overpass. From where they stood, the depot was just barely visible, a cluster of industrial buildings beyond the embankment, half hidden by scrub oak and the concrete shadow of the overpass itself. Pale beige walls, a loading bay that hadn't seen active freight in at least 2 years, based on the weeds growing along the dock edges. "I was inside it," Noah said, 2 days ago. "Not by choice. They were using it as a staging point. I heard enough. There's a convoy moving north, federal marshals transporting digital evidence from a case in Tucson. Testimony. Encrypted drives." He paused. "The kind of thing that, if it reaches a federal courthouse, puts a very specific group of very wealthy people in very permanent trouble. And the overpass is mined." The words sat between them in the afternoon heat. "They've been running wires for 3 days. I saw the detonation equipment. Whoever's in that depot, and there are still people in that depot, they're waiting for a signal. The convoy is the target. The bridge goes down, convoy goes with it, and everything on those drives burns." He looked at Grim steadily. "You and your people ride out of here the way you came in, you cross that overpass, and you're on top of those wires when someone decides it's time." Grim was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned slightly and looked at Decker. Decker's coffee cup was very still in his hand. "He could be wrong," Decker said. "Not challenging, just putting it out there." the way careful men do. He could be, Grim agreed. Or he could be scared and confused and looking for, I know what I saw. Noah's voice had gone very quiet and very precise. I know what I heard. I was in that building. I know what the detonation timer looks like. I know what name they use for the operation, Ridgeline. I know the call sign for the convoy. I know the bridge. He looked at Decker. I'm not confused. Another beat of silence. How'd you get out of the depot? Grim asked. Loading bay drain, 3 feet wide. They didn't think anyone small enough to fit it would survive what came before. A pause. They underestimated me. Something shifted in Grim's expression. Not pity, something with more respect in it. He pushed off the wall and looked out at the lot, at his bike sitting in the afternoon sun, at the highway beyond. His mind was doing the geometry, the overpass, the timing, 14 bikes in formation, the specific physics of a detonation charge positioned under a concrete span. He thought about laughing, 2 minutes ago, at a 16-year-old warning him. The laugh felt a long time past. Decker, he said, keep everyone here. Nobody rides out. Tell Tuck to stop whatever he's doing to that tire and pay attention. Decker straightened. What are you doing? I'm going to take a look at a freight depot. He glanced back at Noah. You're staying here. No. The word came out flat and final, with none of the uncertainty the boy had been carrying a half hour ago. If you go in there without knowing where to look, you'll walk past every piece of evidence they have and think you're seeing an empty building. I know where they set up. I know what they moved when. A pause. You need me. Grim studied him for 3 seconds. If something goes wrong, he said, you run. You don't look back. You don't wait for me. You run south along the fence line, and you keep running until you hit the county road. You understand me? Noah held his gaze. Okay. Say it back. South along the fence, county road. Keep running. Good. He turned to go. Grim. Decker's voice had an edge in it that Grim recognized, the sound of a man who wanted to say more than the situation had room for. I know, Grim said. That he didn't know, exactly. But he'd learned that was sometimes the most useful thing to say. They moved out of the lot through the gap in the east fence, into the dead space between the truck stop property and the highway embankment. The heat was different out here, unmediated by shade or concrete, just the full weight of the Arizona afternoon pressing down like something with intentions. The ground was hard-packed dirt and decomposed granite, scattered with dry brittle bush, the occasional rusted piece of something that had fallen off a truck years ago and been forgotten by the road. Noah walked beside him and slightly ahead, navigating without hesitation, which told Grim the boy had covered this ground before. Recently. How many of them did you see? Grim asked. 3 in the depot itself. There's at least 1 more in a vehicle, a dark blue pickup. It's been parking on the south access road. They rotate. He glanced sideways. The man who runs the operation stays in the truck. He doesn't go inside. What does he look like? 50s, gray hair cut short. He wears civilian clothes, but he moves like military. Not current military, the kind of military that left and went somewhere darker. Grim filed it. The depot emerged from behind the scrub as they approached. 3 low buildings arranged in a rough U around a central loading area, the whole property enclosed by chain link that had been allowed to sag and rust at the corners. The loading bays faced west, toward the highway access. The back of the main building was what faced them now. A blank wall of pale cinder block with 2 small windows set high, and a fire exit door that had been propped open with a cinder block. Grim slowed. The door was propped open. That wasn't open before, Noah said, his voice dropping. He stopped. When I left, that door was... The sound of gravel shifting came from the left. Grim reached out and put one hand on Noah's shoulder and pushed him sideways behind the stand of scrub oak before the motion was even a conscious decision. Pure instinct, the body remembering years of situations with the same geometry. He went low himself, down to one knee, watching. A figure appeared at the corner of the building, male, dressed in work clothes, moving without urgency. He stopped, lit a cigarette, and looked out toward the highway. Not a casual look. A monitoring look. The kind of look that's doing a job. Noah's breath was controlled beside him. The kid had the presence of mind not to move or make sound. They waited. The figure finished the cigarette, dropped it, ground it under a boot, and went back around the corner. Grim and Noah held position for another 30 seconds, then moved along the fence to the eastern side of the building, where the scrub oak grew denser. Inside the fire exit door, visible from 6 feet away in the dimness of the interior, was a folding table. On the table were 2 laptops, an open equipment case, and something that Grim identified immediately from specific and unfortunate prior experience. Detonation hardware. Military grade. Not improvised. The kind of equipment that costs real money and requires specific knowledge to operate correctly. The casing was black, matte, with a digital readout. Beside it, a coil of wire that ran toward the floor and disappeared through a gap at the base of the wall. Grim stared at it for 5 full seconds. He thought about a 16-year-old boy in an irrigation culvert, surviving on gas station food, carrying something in his head that everyone around him was trying to cut out. He thought about the overpass. He thought about 14 bikes crossing it in less than an hour. He took out his phone, took 3 photographs through the gap in the door, and then put the phone away and looked at Noah in the shadows of the scrub oak. The boy was watching him with an expression of exhausted vindication. The look of someone who has been right about something terrible and takes no pleasure in the fact. "How long until the convoy?" Grim said. "Based on what I heard," Noah said, "less than 2 hours." Grim straightened up slowly. Behind them, 40 feet away beyond the fence, the highway shimmered in the heat, empty for now. For now. He started to speak. That was when they both heard it. The sound of a vehicle on the south access road, moving fast, throwing gravel. A dark blue pickup, coming around the corner of the property with the engine pushed hard. And from the direction of the truck stop, 200 yards away, a single sound cut across the afternoon air. Sharp, high, unmistakable. A gunshot. Noah went white. Grim's hand found his arm in the dark. "Don't," he said, quietly. "Absolutely." But his eyes had already gone to the truck stop, where the sound had come from, where Decker was, where 13 men were standing in the parking lot with no idea that the operation had just moved up its timetable. His phone vibrated in his pocket. One word from Decker: "Now!" The gunshot sound didn't echo the way shots do in movies, clean and defined and cinematic. Out here in the open desert, it cracked, and then collapsed into the heat and disappeared, swallowed by distance and hardpan and the particular indifference of the Arizona afternoon. But Grim had heard enough of them in enough places to know exactly what it was, and his body knew before his mind finished processing. He was already moving. "Stay behind me," he said to Noah, and his voice had changed. Not louder, not harder, but stripped of everything except function. The voice of a man who had been in the specific situation of running toward gunfire before and had learned to narrow himself down to what the next 3 seconds required. They came through the gap in the fence at a low run, Grim in front with his hand out behind him, palm back, keeping Noah in his peripheral vision. The scrub oak tore at their arms. The sun hit them full in the face as they cleared the fence line. The truck stop parking lot opened up ahead of them, and Grim read the scene in pieces. The way you do when things are moving fast and you need information sorted by importance. 2 men he didn't recognize, standing at the edge of the lot near the pumps. Dark clothing. One had something in his right hand, low against his leg, that was not a phone and not a wallet. The other was watching the diner entrance with the specific patience of someone who was waiting for movement, not creating it. Decker was visible behind a parked semi, using the cab as cover, his phone pressed to his ear. Alive. Alert. Good. 3 other iron vultures had positioned themselves in the space between the bikes and the diner, not confrontationally but not neutrally either. The instinctive spread of men who've spent enough time around each other to move into defensive geometry without being told. Tuck was on the ground. Not collapsed, seated, with his back against the front tire of his bike, holding his forearm against his chest. There was blood on his hand. Not catastrophic, not arterial, but real and red and visible from 40 feet. Grim's jaw tightened. He came into the lot from the east side and the 2 men turned toward him, and he watched the calculation happen in their eyes. The assessment of threat, the inventory of what he was, the decision about what to do with that information. The one with the weapon made a small adjustment, not raising it, just reminding everyone it was there. Road captain of the Iron Vultures. The one without the visible weapon spoke. A medium-built man in his 40s, gray at the temples, with the particular effect of someone comfortable with situations that weren't comfortable. Long way from home. We're not far from anywhere, Grim said. He stopped walking, 12 feet between him and the nearer man. That's my guy on the ground. Your guy got in the way. Of what? A pause. The man looked past Grim to Noah, and something in his expression changed. A tightening, a recalibration. He looked back at Grim. The boy is a problem that belongs to other people. We're here to collect him and leave. Nobody else needs to be involved. He's standing behind me, Grim said. That makes him involved with us. That's a mistake. Wouldn't be my first. He didn't blink. Put the weapon away. The man studied him for a long 3 seconds. Whatever he saw in Grim's face apparently required some reevaluation of the situation, because he made a small gesture with 2 fingers, and the one with the weapon shifted his weight but didn't holster. You don't know what you're stepping into, the man said. His tone had moved slightly, still controlled, but with something beneath it now. Not quite warning, more like a man who's calculating whether an obstacle is movable or whether it has to be gone around. You shot one of mine, Grim said. I know exactly what I'm stepping into. Decker appeared from behind the semi, moving around the cab with the deliberate economy of a large man who wanted his size to be noticed without being threatening, the specific body language of someone making a point with their presence. 2 more iron vultures came out of the diner, not running, not posturing, just appearing, the way men do when a location fills up and the math changes. The man in gray assessed the new math. He took out a phone, typed something without looking at the screen, and pocketed it. This isn't over, he said. Rarely is, Grim replied. They left the way they'd arrived, unhurried, which was somehow worse than if they'd rushed. Men who leave slowly when they're outnumbered are men who know the next move belongs to someone else. Grim watched them go. He listened for the sound of an engine starting somewhere beyond the lot. He heard it. East side, maybe 200 yards, a vehicle accelerating onto the access road. Gone. He turned to Tuck. Tuck was 26 and had joined the Iron Vultures 14 months ago after getting out of the army with a shoulder that worked at 60% and a sleeping pattern that didn't work at all. I was young enough to still be surprised by things, and experienced enough to know that being surprised was a liability. He was currently experiencing both at once. Let me see it, Grim said, crouching beside him. Tuck moved the forearm away from his chest. The wound was a graze. The bullet had taken a strip of skin and muscle from the outside of the forearm, but hadn't gone through. Painful. Ugly. Not life-threatening. I was watching the highway, Tuck said, with the particular tone of a man who needs to explain himself, even though no one asked. They came from the side of the building. I didn't see them until— Stop, Grim said. Not your fault. They were already here. He stood up and looked around the lot. Anybody else? No. That was Rains. Marcus Rains, the club's oldest member, 61 years old, with 30 of those years in the saddle and a face that looked like it had been used to weather things. He was standing near the diner entrance with a coffee cup that was still somehow in his hand. 2 of them came in through the back of the diner about 10 minutes before you got back. Said they were looking for a lost kid. Showed a photo. He looked at Noah. The photo was of him. Every head in the lot turned to Noah. Noah stood very still under the weight of 14 pairs of eyes, with varying degrees of alarm, assessment, and calculation in them. He'd positioned himself slightly behind Grim without making a production of it, the instinct of someone who has learned to identify the safest point in a room and orient toward it. The photo, Grim said to Rains. What were they claiming? Parents? Law enforcement? Neither. That's what was wrong about it. Rains set the coffee cup down on the hood of the nearest truck. They didn't claim anything. They just showed the photo and said they were looking for him. No explanation of who they were, no ID offered. He paused. I've dealt with investigators, marshals, skip tracers, every kind of person who comes looking for someone. These weren't any of those. No, Grim agreed. They weren't. He turned to face his club. All of them now, gathered in the cracked parking lot of a truck stop 40 miles from anywhere, in the full heat of a Tuesday afternoon, with a wounded member and a 16-year-old in a situation that had shifted several times in the last half hour and was still moving. He knew these men. Had ridden beside most of them through things that didn't have clean category names. Not war exactly. Not crime exactly, but the particular territory that exists when ordinary systems fail, and what's left are people who have to make decisions that ordinary systems would rather nobody made. He trusted them. More to the point, they trusted each other, which was a different and more precise thing. What he saw in their faces right now was not uniform. Decker was watching him with the steady attention of a man waiting to align himself with the decision he already partially knew was coming. Rains was thoughtful and still. Tuck, despite the arm, had the particular alertness of someone who'd been hurt and was now running on adrenaline and a specific desire to do something about it. But there were others. Cross, real name Philip Vandermeer, vice president of the chapter, 48 years old, who had a daughter in Phoenix and a mortgage, and 2 years left before he'd been quietly planning to step back from the road life and try something that looked more like normalcy. I was standing at the edge of the group with his arms crossed and his expression saying several things at once. And Harlan. Danny Harlan, who everyone called by his last name, who'd been with the club 9 years and had survived 2 federal investigations and a period in the mid-2000s that nobody talked about in specifics. He was looking at Noah the way you look at a locked door when you're not sure what's behind it. "Talk to me," Grimm said to the group. Not asking for permission, asking for information. Cross was the one who spoke. "We came out here for a charity ride. We're done. Tuck needs a hospital." Agreed on Tuck. So we call it. We load up. We take the south route back to Flagstaff, skip the overpass entirely, and we let law enforcement handle whatever the situation is. "The south route adds 2.5 hours, Grimm said. "I'm aware. And we're leaving this kid alone in a truck stop parking lot with men who just shot one of our members trying to get to him." Cross's jaw moved. He's under our roof." Grimm said it simply, without aggression, which somehow made it land harder. "He's on our property. He came to us. We fed him. That's the roof I'm talking about." The silence that followed had layers in it. It was Harlan who broke it, from across the lot, with his voice pitched low and deliberate. "We don't know if anything he says is true. We know somebody wanted to grab him. That's all. That doesn't mean the overpass story is real. That doesn't mean any of it is." He paused. "I've known people who tell very convincing stories because that's what keeps them alive. Doesn't mean the stories are true." Noah's head had come up when Harlan started talking. He was listening to every word. Grimm looked at his phone. He pulled up the 3 photographs he'd taken through the fire exit door. He walked to Harlan and held the phone up. Harlan looked at the photos for a long moment. His expression didn't change the way someone's expression changes when they see something surprising. It changed the way someone's expression changes when something they suspected is confirmed and they don't want it to be. "That's from inside the depot," Grimm said. "I can see that." "You recognize what you're looking at?" It wasn't a question. Harlan had been in places, specific, classified, documented places, where certain equipment was standard and unremarkable. Grimm didn't know the details and had never asked, and Harlan had never offered. But the recognition on the man's face right now was the recognition of someone looking at a language they're fluent in. "Yeah," Harlan said. He handed the phone back. "I recognize it." "So we're not debating whether the depot is real." "No, we're debating what it is to us." Grimm looked at him steadily. "It's sitting between us and the highway. We go south, and whoever's in that convoy goes north, over a bridge that's been wired." He held Harlan's gaze. "Those aren't our people. You're right about that, but they're people." The words settled into the afternoon heat and didn't move. Decker had said nothing through any of this. He said something now, quietly, from his position near the semi. "We got a kid who watched his brother get killed for knowing something. We got a bridge wired to drop a federal convoy. We got men who just put a bullet next to Tuck's arm trying to collect the only witness." He paused. "And we got 14 bikes and nowhere pressing to be." Cross looked at Decker. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make it sound simple. It's not simple." "I know it's not simple, Phil." Decker rarely used Cross's name. The sound of it made Cross go slightly still. "I know you've got Karen and the house and the plan. I know what you've got. I'm not asking you to throw it away." A beat. "I'm asking you to be here for the next hour. That's all any of this ever is. The next hour." Cross looked at the ground. His jaw worked. He said nothing. Grimm turned to Noah. The boy was watching the exchange with the careful attention of someone mapping the room, who who was aligned, who was resistant, where the pressure points were. He was smart. Grimm had known it since the parking lot, but he was seeing it more clearly now. Noah Ryder had spent enough time in rooms where he was the smallest and least powerful person to have developed a specific and accurate radar for how groups made decisions. "The address your brother sent you," Grimm said. "The numbers." Noah's eyes sharpened. "What about them? Is it on a drive, a server, physical location?" "Physical location. My brother didn't trust anything that could be remotely wiped. He said the safest storage in the world was analog." A pause. "It's in a rented storage unit in Flagstaff, under a name that took me 3 days to work out from the sequence he gave me." "What's on it?" "Everything. Records going back 6 years. Names, transaction records, communications, evidence of the convoy operation, evidence of 3 other operations I don't have names for." He held Grimm's gaze. "Enough to end what they're building. And you're the only one who knows the location." "I'm the only one left who could find it." A pause. "Yes." Grimm nodded slowly. He was doing the math. Not the combat math, which was familiar and had a logic to it, but the other kind. The moral math, which was less clean and didn't always balance. He turned back to his club. He looked at each of them for a moment. Decker, steady. Rains, thoughtful. Tuck, bleeding and ready. Cross, conflicted and honest about it. Harlan, guarded and watching. The others ranging from certain to uncertain. None of them pretending. "I'm not ordering anyone, but," he said. "We don't do that. You know what I'm looking at. You know what I think we should do. Anyone who wants to take the south route, Tuck goes with you. He needs that arm looked at. You go. No judgment. I mean that." Nobody moved. Cross uncrossed his arms. He looked at the highway. He looked at the overpass, visible in the distance, the pale concrete of it rising against the blue. Then he looked at Noah, for a long 3 seconds, with an expression that wasn't hostility anymore. It was something more complicated. A man measuring a kid against the thing the kid was carrying. 2 hours, Cross said. Not a question. An allocation. "Maybe less," Grimm said, "and then we get Tuck to a hospital." "Yes." Cross nodded once. Done negotiating. Grimm pulled out his phone and stepped away from the group. He had a contact. Not law enforcement, not federal, but adjacent to federal in the way certain people become when they've been in the right places and known the right people for long enough. A man named Ortega, who had spent 20 years in a federal agency that didn't encourage specifics and had retired to Tucson and occasionally provided information to people who weren't officially authorized to receive it, in exchange for nothing except the maintenance of a particular kind of conscience. He dialed. Ortega picked up on the second ring. "It's Mercer." "Silas." A pause. "You're not calling to tell me you've arrived somewhere safely." "No." Grimm kept his voice low. He moved to the far side of the truck stop, near the chain-link fence, where the ambient noise from the highway covered him. He spoke for 90 seconds, conveying what he had in the specific, efficient language of someone used to situations where time was the limiting factor. The depot, the equipment, the photographs, the convoy timeline, the name Noah had given him, Ridgeline. The silence on Ortega's end when he finished was a specific kind of silence, the silence of a man rapidly reorganizing what he thought he knew. "Ridgeline," Ortega said finally, just the word. "You've heard it." "I've heard something adjacent to it." Another pause. "Silas, you need to understand something. If that convoy gets hit, if those drives are destroyed, it doesn't just set back a case. There are people named on those drives who have been specifically avoiding being named for 6 years. Some of them are very difficult people who become more difficult when they feel threatened. I know the type. These are specific instances of the type." Ortega's voice had taken on the particular cadence of a man choosing words with precision. "The convoy has a shadow, federal tactical. It was arranged for exactly the scenario you're describing. They know the route is compromised. What they don't know is where the charges are positioned. Or how many. Or the trigger configuration." A beat. "The boy knows these things?" "He was inside." "Then the boy is the most important person in southern Arizona right now." Ortega paused. "And the people who want him dead are not going to let the location of 14 Harley-Davidsons complicate their day for very long." Grim looked back across the lot at Noah, who was now sitting on a low concrete barrier at the edge of the lot, having his forearm examined by someone's— wait, not Tuck's arm, Noah's. Someone had handed him a first aid kit and he was doing it himself, calmly, methodically, cleaning a scrape on his elbow that Grim hadn't noticed in the scrub oak earlier. Doing it himself. Of course he was. "I need a channel," Grim said into the phone. "Someone who can coordinate with the tactical shadow without running it through regular dispatch. If it goes through standard channels, the people who've already bought their way into the room will know about it." "I have a name," Ortega said. He hesitated. "It's going to require you to trust a federal agent, Silas." "I've done harder things." "I know you have." A pause. "Her name is Vasquez. She's the reason the tactical shadow exists. She'll receive anything you send through me. I'll make sure of it." Another pause. This one weighted differently. "These men in the depot, are they watching the truck stop?" "They have a presence here, maybe still." "Then assume they're already reporting your position." Ortega's voice went flat and final. "Don't stay where you are." The call ended. Grim stood with the phone in his hand for 2 seconds, staring at the chain link and the empty desert beyond it, and the pale concrete of the overpass rising against the blue. Then he walked back to his club. He laid it out in 2 minutes, cleanly, without editorializing. The convoy had a tactical shadow, federal backup, that knew the route was compromised but needed the specific intelligence Noah carried. The operation had a name and a level of organization that meant the people running it had resources and patience. Their current position was known and was being reported. "We need to move," he said, "and we need to move toward the depot, not away from it." Cross looked up sharply. "Toward it. We're the only people on the ground who know exactly what's in there and where it is. We're the only people with direct contact with the witness. If we ride south and wait for someone else to handle it, we lose both of those things." He paused. "We become passengers." "Some of us like being passengers," Cross said. But there was something in the way he said it, a self-awareness, a wryness, that had moved past pure resistance. "Noah." Grim turned to him. "The command trailer. You mentioned it. Where is it positioned relative to the depot buildings?" Noah stood up from the concrete barrier. First aid done, elbow wrapped with a bandage pulled from the kit. He had the look of someone who's been waiting for the conversation to reach him. "South side, behind the main building. It looks like part of the property. It's an old construction trailer, painted to match the cinder block." He paused. "They run the whole operation from in there. The detonation controller has a backup there too." "Can you find it from the west side of the property?" "Yes." "In the dark?" A pause. "What time does it get dark here?" "About 2 hours." Grim looked at the sky. "Maybe a little less." Something moved in Noah's face. A decision. Not the anxious decision of someone afraid, the deliberate decision of someone who has already paid a significant price and has made peace with the possibility of paying more. "Yeah," he said, "I can find it." Decker appeared at Grim's elbow, close enough to speak quietly. "The men who were here, they reported our position. Within the hour, this lot is going to have more company." "I know. So we're not debating, we're moving." "We're moving." Decker nodded and straightened and turned to the group with the particular quality of motion that Grim had always appreciated in him. No hesitation, no performance, just the clean efficiency of a man who has made a decision and is executing it. "On bikes in 10 minutes. Leave anything you don't need. Tuck, you're in the center of the formation. Don't argue with me about it." Tuck did not argue. They moved. In 9 minutes, 14 engines were running. The sound of it filled the parking lot and traveled west toward the distant mountains, east toward the highway, up into the white Arizona sky. The woman behind the diner counter watched through the window. The trucker who'd been inside since before any of this had started looked up from his phone again with the expression of someone feeling a shift in atmospheric pressure he couldn't name. Noah stood beside Grim's bike. "You ride?" Grim asked. "No." "You're about to learn the basics. Get on behind me, hold on to the sides of the seat, not me, and don't lean against the turns. Lean with them." He swung on. "And if I say get off, you get off. You don't ask why. You just go." Noah got on behind him. The formation pulled out of the Red Mesa truck stop lot in a slow, tight arc, 14 bikes finding their configuration with the ease of long practice. They took the access road east, away from the highway, away from the overpass, using the industrial roads that ran parallel to the highway behind the property lines. The roads that trucks use when they're delivering to depots and freight yards, that nobody else uses, that don't appear on standard navigation apps. They were 3/4 of a mile from the depot when Grimm's phone buzzed. Not a call, a text. From a number he didn't recognize, which meant it had come through Ortega. 3 words. Convoy departed early. Grimm read it twice. Then he looked at the clock on the phone. He did the math, time, distance, the speed of a federal convoy on the highway. The convoy was going to reach the overpass in 40 minutes, not 2 hours. 40 minutes. Noah had felt the bike slow and leaned forward slightly. What? Grimm looked out across the flat desert terrain toward the overpass, visible now from this angle as a pale strip of concrete suspended between its supports, ordinary and patient and full of things that were about to go wrong. He thought about the detonation timer on the table inside the depot, the digital readout, the clean black casing. He thought about someone in a command trailer receiving a message very similar to the one he'd just received, that the convoy had departed early, and reaching for a controller and beginning to recalculate their own timeline. He put the phone away. "Hold on," he said to Noah, and he opened the throttle. The formation accelerated as one, the engines rising together into something that was less a sound than a pressure, a physical fact. 14 machines eating distance at a rate that made the flat desert blur at the edges. The access road was rough, and the bike moved under Grimm with the aliveness of something barely contained, and he felt Noah's hands grip the sides of the seat with more urgency, and he pushed the speed up another notch because there was no more time for anything except what happened next. Through the scrub oak ahead, he could see the chain link of the depot's west perimeter, and parked along the fence, 3 vehicles that hadn't been there an hour ago, and men. Standing at the fence line, watching the road, watching them. And in the center of the men, in civilian clothes, with gray hair cut short, and the bearing of someone who had once moved through worse situations than this and survived all of them, was the man Noah had described. The man from the truck, who was looking directly at Grimm, who raised a radio to his mouth. And in that moment, somewhere behind the cinderblock walls of the depot, a digital readout that had been counting toward a number nobody wanted it to reach received a new instruction. And the countdown compressed from 40 minutes to something that made Grimm's hands tighten on the bars and his mind go very still and very fast at the same time. Because Noah had just said, in a voice stripped of everything except the flat certainty of someone delivering a fact, "That's the man who killed my brother." The throttle was already open when Noah said it. The words hit Grimm somewhere between the ears and the chest and stayed there, vibrating at a frequency that had nothing to do with the engine beneath him. He processed the sentence, "That's the man who killed my brother." In the same second that he processed the man raising the radio, and the 2 pieces of information collapsed into each other and produced a single clear output, they were out of time. He didn't slow down. He banked hard left, away from the fence line, cutting across the packed dirt of the access road shoulder and into the scrub, the bike bucking under them as the terrain changed. He heard Noah make a sound. Not a cry, not a word, just the involuntary exhale of someone whose body has just registered that the situation has escalated past their nervous system's ability to stay quiet about it. The formation behind him read the move and followed, 14 bikes spreading into the scrub in a loose scatter that turned the clean formation into something more like a dispersal pattern. Instinctive, practiced, the kind of movement that happens when men have ridden together long enough that a single gesture from the lead rider translates instantly into coordinated action. They put the scrub oak and the embankment between themselves and the depot fence line in under 30 seconds. Grimm brought the bike down to a stop behind a cluster of mature desert willow, the engine dropping to idle, and the formation settled around him in the broken shade. Dust moved through the air. Nobody spoke. The engines ticked and breathed. He looked back through the branches. The man with the gray hair was still at the fence. He'd lowered the radio. He was looking at the spot where 14 motorcycles had just been. I was not running. He was not shouting. He was simply looking, with the stillness of someone who has already made the relevant phone calls and is now waiting for the consequences to develop. That stillness was the most frightening thing about him. "Talk to me," Grimm said to Noah quietly, under the engine noise. The man at the fence. His name. Noah's hands were pressed flat against his thighs. Grim could feel the tension in the boy's body even without looking, a rigidity that had nothing to do with fear of the bike and everything to do with what he'd just seen. Carver, Noah said. That's what they called him. I never heard a first name. He runs the operation. He hides the operation. The others answer to him. Everyone answers to him. A pause. I was there when they took my brother. I was in the car, in the back seat, under a tarp, because my brother had made me hide there in case something went wrong with the handoff. He was going to deliver the first batch of files to someone. A contact. His voice didn't waver. It had the flat, locked quality of someone who has rehearsed this narrative so many times in their own head that the telling of it has been stripped of everything except the essential sequence. The contact wasn't who Marcus thought. Carver was there instead. They talked for less than a minute. Then it wasn't talking anymore. The formation was quiet around them. Nobody was pretending not to listen. I stayed under the tarp for 4 hours, Noah said. Then I got out and I walked. He stopped. That's the whole story of how I got here. Decker had pulled up beside Grim, close enough to speak without projecting. The convoy timeline. 40 minutes, maybe less by now. Grim looked at his phone. 37 minutes since the text from Ortega. He did the math on convoy speed and highway distance. 30, maybe 28. Decker's expression didn't change, which for Decker was significant. His face was the kind of face that showed its shifts in very small increments. A tightening around the eyes, a slight compression of the mouth. Right now, both of those things were happening simultaneously. We can't reach the depot in time to disable what's in there. Not through the front. Not through any approach that involves getting past Carver and whoever he's got with him. Decker paused. Which leads to the question of what we can actually do in 28 minutes. We can stop the convoy. Silence. Before it reaches the overpass, Grim continued. If we get ahead of it on the highway and create a hard stop, visual, physical, something that can't be ignored, we can buy time for Vasquez's tactical team to reach the depot. Creating a hard stop on a federal highway with 14 motorcycles, Cross said, from 3 bikes to the left, with the tone of a man identifying a problem rather than objecting to a solution, which was a different thing, and Grim registered it as such. Yes. The convoy isn't going to just stop because we're standing in the road. No. But if we're standing in the road and we're transmitting Noah's intelligence on the convoy frequency, the call sign he knows, the operation name, the specific technical details only. Someone with direct knowledge would have, whoever's running that convoy is going to have a decision to make. Do they push through 14 motorcycles or do they hold position while someone verifies? A beat of silence. Harlan spoke from the back. That's thin. Yes, Grim agreed. If they don't hold, we're in the path of a federal convoy moving at speed. I know. And if Carver sees us on the highway, he activates early. We're on the overpass, the convoy's behind us. We don't go over the overpass. Grim looked at him. We stop before it. On the south side, the convoy stops behind us. And the charge fires anyway and takes out the bridge we're not on. Yes, but the convoy doesn't go down with it. The evidence survives. Vasquez's team hits the depot. He paused. That's the sequence. Another silence. Different quality from the ones before. The silence of men running the math on a plan that worked on paper and had approximately the right number of moving pieces to be executable, with an acceptable margin of things that could go wrong if acceptable was defined loosely. It was Rains who said what several of them were thinking. What about the boy? Grim turned. Noah was sitting sideways on the back of the bike, both feet on the ground, watching the group the way he'd watched them in the parking lot, mapping the room, reading the alignments. He'd heard everything. He wasn't pretending he hadn't. I'm not staying here, Noah said. You're not going on the highway. I know the convoy call sign, I know ridgeline. I know the technical specifications of the charge configuration. If you're going to convince that convoy to stop, you need me talking. He held Grim's gaze. I'm the only credential you have. Grim stared at him for a long 3 seconds. He thought about a 16-year-old under a tarp in the backseat of a car, listening to his brother's last conversation, staying still for 4 hours afterward, walking out into the desert alone. 2 nights in an irrigation culvert, 11 hours on foot across broken terrain, running toward bikers because there was nothing left to run toward. This kid had not stopped making the hard call since the moment everything went wrong. He'd been making it continuously, in the dark, alone, without anyone telling him he was right to. Okay, Grimm said. He looked at Decker. Decker gave him the specific nod that meant, I've already thought through what you're about to say, and I agree with it, which was one of the most useful things about 20 years of partnership. Decker takes half the group to the depot perimeter, not inside perimeter. They contain Carver's people and prevent any attempt to manually trigger. They hold position until Vasquez's team arrives. He looked at Decker. Can you do that without engaging? I can do that, Decker said. He paused one beat. Probably. Rains, you're with Decker. Harlan, also Decker, Harlan said, before Grimm could assign him. Something in his voice had shifted. The guardedness was still there, but underneath it, something else had come up. Not enthusiasm. More like the particular resolution of a man who has finished an internal argument and arrived at the side he was always going to be on. Good. Cross. Tuck. I said don't argue with me about the arm. Tuck's voice from somewhere in the formation was thin with pain and absolutely firm. Cross looked at the sky, then at the highway, then at the overpass, then at nothing. I've got a contact in the Phoenix field office, he said. Personal contact, not through channels. I can have her calling Vasquez's number in 5 minutes. He looked at Grimm. Something to smooth the approach. Make the call, Grimm said. Do it now. They worked fast. Cross moved off to the edge of the scrub, phone out, voice low and rapid. Decker pulled his people together in a loose cluster and spoke to them for 90 seconds in the quiet, economical language of a man who has led men through compressed situations before. Rains listened with his arms at his sides. Harlan listened with his eyes on the fence line. Grimm pulled out the Ortega channel and sent 3 lines of text. Convoy intercept, south approach, Vasquez coordination needed. He got back 2 words. She knows. He looked at his phone clock. 23 minutes, roughly, to convoy arrival at the overpass. Noah, he turned. The call sign. Iron Bridge 7. He sent it to Ortega. Got back. Confirmed. Use it. And the detonation configuration. How is it triggered? Noah stood up from the bike. He was thinking, not searching, but organizing, pulling things into the sequence they needed to be in. Primary is radio signal from the command trailer. Secondary is a physical trigger inside the depot, wired to a timer. If Carver activates the secondary, the timer runs independently. Jamming his radio signal won't stop it. What stops the timer? Physically severing the wire run, or the power source for the timer. It's on a separate circuit from the trailer, runs off a battery unit inside the depot. A pause. I know where the battery is. Grimm looked at him. It's in the main building, near the fire exit. I saw it when I came through. Noah's voice was completely steady. If someone severs that connection, the timer dies. Carver still has the primary trigger from the trailer, but without the backup, there's a 2-minute delay built into the primary sequence. 2 minutes is enough time for the convoy to pull back out of the blast radius. How do you know there's a 2-minute delay? Because I heard them arguing about it. The faintest trace of something crossed Noah's face. The ghost of an expression that in another context might have been darkly funny. The man running the technical side wanted 10 minutes. Carver wanted 30 seconds. They settled on 2. I was in the wall cavity above the operations room. I heard the whole negotiation. Grimm absorbed this. You were in the wall. The crawl space above the drop ceiling. I was in there for 6 hours before I went out through the drain. He said it plainly. As a logistical fact. I needed to know everything they knew before I left. If I was only going to have one chance to tell someone, I needed to tell them everything. The formation was watching, not performing attention. Just present with it, the way men get when they realize the person they've been assessing has just shifted categories. Grimm turned away to look at the desert for a moment. He was thinking about the battery unit near the fire exit. He was thinking about the fire exit propped open with a cinder block. He was thinking about Carver at the fence, who had seen them, who was in the command trailer now, who was looking at a radio controller and a timeline that had just compressed. He was thinking about Decker's group holding the perimeter while someone went in. The battery unit, he said. What does it look like? Black case. About the size of a car battery. Red connector on the top. The wire runs through a PVC conduit in the floor. You can see it. It's not hidden. They didn't think anyone would be in there who wasn't supposed to be. Noah paused. You need something to cut it. Wire cutter, knife, anything with an edge. Grim looked down at his belt. The fixed blade knife he'd carried for 11 years on the road. He touched the handle once. All right, he said. He turned to the formation. This is how it goes. Decker's group takes the east approach to the depot perimeter. You know the fence gap. You've seen the property. Hold at the perimeter. Do not engage unless fired upon, and if fired upon, do not advance. Your job is to make sure nobody leaves that property before Vasquez's people arrive. That is your entire job. Decker nodded. My group takes the highway. South approach. Stop side of the overpass. We create the block, we transmit the call sign and the intelligence. We give that convoy a reason to hold. He paused. I'm going into the depot. Several things happened at once. Decker's head came up. Cross turned. Raines said nothing, but his posture changed. Harlan said quietly, That's not what you just said. I know what I just said. Grim kept his voice level. The plan works if the battery unit is severed. The battery unit is in the depot. Someone has to go in. Someone, Decker said. Not agreeing, not objecting, identifying. I know the layout, Noah said. You're not going back in there. Grim's voice had a quality in it that ended sentences. Not under any circumstances. Then I tell you, and you go. Tell me. Noah walked him through it in 120 seconds. The fire exit door, the layout of the main building interior, the position of the operations table, the battery unit against the east wall, the conduit running along the floor. He used his hands to indicate spatial relationships. Here, then the wire runs this direction. And Grim tracked it with the attention of a man building a map he was going to have to navigate in reduced visibility. Carver's people inside, Grim said. How many? When I left, 3. Could be more now. Position. The 2 in the operations area near the table, 1 in the loading bay north side. A pause. They move. I can't give you certainty. Nobody gives certainty, Grim said. That's fine. He looked at Decker for a long moment. Between them passed something that had no name and didn't need one. The specific exchange of 2 men who have been in enough situations together that a look carries the full weight of a conversation. 20 minutes, Decker said. It was both an acknowledgement and a timeline. Less, Grim said. He looked at Cross. How's the Phoenix contact? She's on with Vasquez's team coordinator. They're 45 out. Cross paused. She asked me to tell you that this is not standard procedure. Nothing today has been standard procedure. Grim swung onto his bike. Tell her we'll debrief when it's over. The formation split. Decker took 7 bikes east along the access road, moving quiet. Throttles low. Formation spread, using the terrain as cover the way soldiers use it. Raines rode second. Harlan rode last, and as he passed Grim he looked over once, without slowing, and gave a single nod that carried something Grim filed away to think about later. Grim took the remaining bikes west, back toward the highway access, riding the edge of the embankment where the road met the desert margin. Noah was behind him, 6 bikes following. They hit the highway going north. The overpass was visible ahead. 300 meters, 400, the pale concrete of it rising against an afternoon sky that had begun to change. While they'd been in the scrub, weather had moved in from the northwest. Not the dramatic storm front kind, but the insidious kind. A high, thin overcast that turned the light gray and flat and made distances deceptive. The temperature had dropped 6 degrees in the last 40 minutes. Grim felt it on his forearms, on the back of his hands where they wrapped the bars. They stopped on the south side of the overpass approach, not on the bridge, before it. At the base of the ramp, where the highway widened slightly before it climbed, where the shoulder gave enough room for 7 motorcycles to spread across the roadway and create something that a driver would have to either stop for or drive through. They stopped. Engines idling. Grim got off the bike and stood in the roadway and looked north toward where the convoy would come from. Nothing yet. The highway stretched empty under the gray sky, 2 lanes and a median, vanishing into the flat distance. He took out his phone and called Ortega. I need the convoy frequency. 30 seconds later, he had it. He handed the phone to Noah. You're the voice they'll recognize. Give them everything. Ridgeline, the detonation configuration, The Iron Bridge 7 call sign. Who you are. What you saw. Don't stop talking until they respond. Noah took the phone. His hands were steady. Grim turned to Tuck, who had pulled up on his bike with his wounded arm held slightly away from his body. Stay with him, Grim said. The moment the convoy comes into visual range, you get him off the road. You stay off the road. Grim, this is not a discussion, Tuck. He looked at the young man directly, without softening it. You've already bled today. That's enough. Tuck looked at him for 3 seconds with an expression that was arguing and losing. Then he nodded. Grim turned to Cross. You're holding this line. Cross looked at the highway, at the overpass, at Noah standing in the road with the phone. He looked like a man conducting a rapid and uncomfortable inventory of every choice he'd made that had led to this particular moment, in this particular road, in this particular light. Then he looked at Grim with an expression that had gotten very simple and very clear. Yeah, Cross said. I'm holding the line. Grim went back to his bike. He took the knife from his belt, checked it, replaced it. He looked at the access road that ran parallel to the highway on the eastern side, the road that cut behind the embankment toward the depot. He would go on foot from the fence. The bike was too loud, too visible. He was about to move when Noah said, Grim. He turned. The boy was standing in the middle of the highway with Grim's phone in both hands and an expression that Grim had not seen on him before. Not fear, not urgency, but something more layered. The look of someone who has been holding a piece of information back, not out of deception, but out of the specific protective instinct of someone who didn't want to make things worse. There's something I didn't tell you, Noah said. The wind moved across the highway. Somewhere in the distance, under the overcast, Thunder said something without committing to it. Tell me now, Grim said. The contact my brother was going to hand the files to. The one who turned out to be Carver. He stopped, started again. Marcus spent 3 months building that contact. He was careful. He used intermediaries, checked backgrounds, ran everything through channels he trusted. A pause. The contact was connected to a federal agency. My brother thought he was handing the files to someone inside the system who would protect them. Grim was very still. The contact's name was in the files, is in the files, in the storage unit in Flagstaff. Noah's voice had gone to its flattest register, the register of someone delivering information that they know is going to change the shape of things. Whoever sent Carver to that meeting, whoever burned my brother's contact and set up the ambush, they're inside the federal structure. They've been inside it the whole time. He held Grim's gaze. Vasquez's team. I don't know if she's clean. I don't know if the people she's sending are clean. I don't know if the number Ortega gave you has already been passed to someone who is sitting in an office somewhere deciding what to do about it. The gray sky pressed down. The highway was empty. The overpass waited. My brother trusted the system, Noah said. Once. The silence between them lasted 4 full seconds, which in the middle of a highway with a federal convoy inbound and a wired overpass overhead is a very long time. Grim turned it over. Convoy intercept, the frequency, the call sign, the chain of communication that ran from Ortega to Vasquez to a tactical team that was 45 minutes out. Every piece of that chain had been assembled in the last hour using contacts and connections that felt solid because they'd been solid before. But solid before was not the same as solid now, and the boy standing in the road with his dead brother's secret was right about that in a way that landed in Grim's chest with the particular weight of something undeniable. He thought about Ortega. 20 years in federal service, retired clean, living in Tucson, helping people off the books because his conscience required it. He trusted Ortega. He trusted Ortega the way you trust someone you've tested in the specific conditions that matter. I thought about what Noah had not said, that all of it was compromised, just that he didn't know, which was a different thing and required a different response. Does Carver know about the storage unit? Grim said. No. Noah was certain. Marcus never wrote it down. He told it to me verbally, once. The only reason Carver doesn't already have those files is because he doesn't know where to look, and the only person who knows is standing here. Then the files are safe for now. For now, Noah agreed. And the convoy is still inbound. Yes. And the bridge is still wired. Yes. Grim looked at the overpass for a long moment. The gray concrete of it, the way it rose from the desert floor on its supports, ordinary and immovable and full of invisible violence. He made the decision he'd been circling since the moment Noah said his brother's name. "We stop the convoy," he said. "We take the bridge issue off the table. Whatever happens after, whoever's clean and whoever isn't, happens after, with the evidence intact and the convoy intact and everyone alive to sort it out." He looked at Noah. "The files are the leverage. As long as they exist, whoever's dirty has a reason to negotiate instead of erase." He paused. "You understand what I'm saying?" "You're saying we win by surviving," Noah said. "I'm saying we make sure the truth has a place to land." He held the boy's gaze. "That's all your brother was trying to do." Something passed through Noah's face that he didn't control and didn't try to. It lasted less than 2 seconds, and then it was gone, replaced by the familiar flat steadiness. But Grim had seen it. He turned toward the access road. That was when his phone, in Noah's hands, lit up with an incoming call from the Ortega channel. Not a text, a call. Ortega never called. Noah answered it and held it out. Grim took it and pressed it to his ear and heard 3 seconds of background noise. Interior space, air movement, the particular ambient texture of somewhere large and enclosed. And then a voice that was not Ortega's. A voice that was measured and quiet, and had the specific quality of someone who has practiced making terrible things sound administrative. "Mr. Mercer," said the voice, "I think we've been working around each other all afternoon. It might be more efficient to speak directly." Grim's hand tightened on the phone. "Carver," he said. "Yes." A brief pause. "You've done remarkable work today, the boy especially. He's more resourceful than we anticipated." A pause. "I want you to understand that none of what's happened today was aimed at you or your people. You're a complication. Unfortunate, but manageable." Another pause. "The bridge fires in 11 minutes. That timeline doesn't change regardless of your position on the highway, because the convoy's early departure has moved everything forward. In 11 minutes, the overpass comes down, and if your people are anywhere near that structure—" "We're not on the bridge," Grim said. A beat. "No, you're smarter than that." Something shifted in the voice. Not quite respect, but its administrative cousin. "Then here's what I'm offering. Take your people south on the highway. Take the boy if you want him. The evidence in Flagstaff will be recovered through other means. We're patient. The convoy operation completes in 11 minutes and we part ways. Everyone breathes. And if I don't, then I send everything I have at your position on the highway and the men I currently have at the depot perimeter." A pause with something cold inside it. "We'll have a conversation with the 7 motorcycles that have been sitting at my fence line for the last 12 minutes. Grim's hand went very tight on the phone. "Decker. 7 bikes. At the perimeter." "If you hurt any of my people," Grim said, and his voice had gone to a place that had no temperature in it at all, "there is no version of the next 11 minutes that ends the way you want it to." "Mr. Mercer," Carver's voice was patient, "you're one man with a knife and a motorcycle on a county highway. I have significant resources." A pause. "What exactly do you think you can do?" Grim looked at the overpass, at the gray sky, at Noah standing 10 feet away with his dead brother's knowledge and his electrical tape boot and his particular exhausted refusal to stop. He looked at Cross, on his bike, holding the line without being asked again. He looked at the access road behind him, which led to a fire exit and a battery unit, and a wire running through a PVC conduit in a floor in 11 minutes. "I'll show you," Grim said. He handed the phone back to Noah and started running. He ran the way men run when running is the only remaining option. Not with form, not with economy, but with everything the body has left after a day that has taken most of it. The access road was rough under his boots, decomposed granite and dried mud, and the occasional piece of debris that caught the toe and required the body to correct mid-stride without slowing. The overcast sky had dropped another degree while he'd been on the highway, and he felt it on his face, on his forearms, the cold that comes before desert rain that isn't quite rain yet, but is building the argument for it. 11 minutes. He ran the number against the distance. 400 meters to the depot fence, another 100 through the property to the fire exit. 60 seconds minimum inside the building if everything went perfectly and nothing went wrong and nobody was standing between him and the east wall where a black battery case was sitting in a PVC conduit housing waiting to be found. Nothing was going to go perfectly. He took the eastern approach, using the embankment as cover, running low along the base of it where the scrub grew in a dense enough tangle to break his silhouette. The depot buildings emerged ahead in the flat gray light. The pale cinder block walls, the loading bay doors, the fire exit on the back wall with its cinder block propping it open. He had one thing going for him. Carver was on the phone. Carver was in the command trailer on the south side of the property. The three men inside the building, or however many there were now, didn't know he was coming from this direction because this direction didn't make tactical sense. He slowed at the fence, looked, listened. The fence gap was 10 meters to his left, a section where the chain link had pulled away from the post at the bottom, creating enough clearance for a man to go through low and fast. He'd noted it on the first pass and had been filing it the way you file things you don't know you'll need until you do. He needed it now. He went through fast, fabric catching on the wire and releasing, and crossed the open ground between the fence and the back wall in a sprint that he felt in his bad knee on every stride. The knee had taken a highway impact 12 years ago and had been conducting an ongoing protest about it ever since. He cataloged the pain and set it aside in the mental compartment where he kept things that mattered but couldn't be allowed to matter right now. He reached the back wall, pressed against the cinder block, breathing hard. The wall was warm from the day's heat even under the overcast, the concrete holding its temperature the way concrete does. He could feel the vibration of something mechanical inside the building. Not loud, but present. A generator, maybe. Equipment running. He moved to the fire exit, looked through the gap. The interior was lit by two portable work lights on stands, the kind that construction crews use, bright and directionless, throwing hard shadows from every object in the room. The folding table was still there, laptops open, the detonation hardware visible, the coil of wire running to the floor. Beyond the table, the room opened into the main body of the building. Concrete floor, steel roof supports, the loading bay doors visible at the far end. One man at the table, seated, back to the door, working on one of the laptops. Light brown jacket, short cropped hair, not Carver. One man visible at the loading bay end, standing with his back to the room, looking at something outside through a gap in the doors. That was two. The third was unaccounted for. Grimm studied the room's geometry from outside. The east wall, where Noah had told him the battery unit was to his left from the door, beyond the table, in the shadow between the two work lights. He could see the PVC conduit running along the base of the wall. The black case was there. He could see it, 20 feet, maybe 25, past the man at the table. He thought about Decker at the fence line, about Carver's voice on the phone. The men I currently have at the depot perimeter will have a conversation with the 7 motorcycles, and felt something move in his chest that wasn't fear. Fear had a cold quality. This was hot. He controlled it the way he controlled everything that ran hot, by narrowing his focus to the next 3 seconds and only the next 3 seconds. The man at the table shifted in his chair, reached for something beside the laptop, a coffee cup based on the motion. Grimm went through the door. He covered the distance to the table in 4 strides, moving on the balls of his feet, and had one hand on the back of the man's jacket before the sound of movement registered. The man began to turn, and Grimm used the momentum of the turn, adding to it, bringing the man's own rotation against him, and put him face down on the table with his right arm locked behind his back, at an angle that communicated very clearly that the alternative to staying still was structural. The coffee cup hit the floor. The laptop skidded sideways. From the loading bay end, the second man spun around. "Don't!" Grimm's voice was not loud. It was the voice from the highway. The voice with no temperature in it, and something in its register communicated information that transcended language. The man at the loading bay read it correctly and went very still. "Where's the third one?" Grimm said. Neither man answered. The man pinned to the table made a sound that was the beginning of an attempt to say something, and Grimm increased the pressure on the arm marginally, and the sound stopped. "I have 8 minutes," Grimm said. 7.5. I'm going to that wall regardless of what happens in this room. The only question is the condition of the room when I get there." A pause. "Where's the third one?" "Loading bay," said the man at the loading bay end. His voice was controlled in the way of someone who has been trained for controlled voice delivery in stressful situations and whose training was currently being tested. "North corner. Step toward me." The man moved forward, away from the bay doors, into the lit area. His hands were at his sides, not raised, not reaching, the body language of someone choosing compliance as a strategic option rather than from any lack of alternative intent. "On the floor," Grimm said. The man looked at him for a 2-second assessment period, concluded whatever he concluded, and sat down on the concrete floor. Not elegantly, but he sat. Grimm looked at the north corner of the loading bay, dark there, the shadows thick under the steel roof supports. "Third man," he said, in the direction of the dark. "I know you're there, you come into the light, or this gets complicated." A silence that lasted 4 seconds. Then, from the dark, a figure moved, younger than the others, maybe 25. He'd been in the gap between 2 stacked pallets, which was a reasonable position, but had the disadvantage of being an exact location Grimm would have chosen himself, which made it predictable. He came forward with his hands partially raised in the specific way of someone who hasn't fully decided yet. "Floor," Grimm said. He sat. Grimm released the man at the table with a controlled movement that set him upright but off balance. "Table," he said. The man went to the floor instead beside the table, which was close enough. He moved to the east wall. The battery unit was exactly where Noah said it would be. Black case, red connector on top, PVC conduit running from the bottom connector along the floor and disappearing through a cutout in the baseboard. The wire inside the conduit ran under the concrete to the overpass charge. He could see where the conduit joined the wall, a neat professional installation that looked permanent but wasn't. He took the knife from his belt. Behind him, one of the men on the floor was moving. He heard the shift of weight on concrete, the specific sound of someone redistributing their position in a way that was not purely for comfort. "Don't," he said, without looking. The movement stopped. He cut the wire. Not through the conduit, through the connection point at the back of the battery unit, where the wire emerged from the housing before entering the conduit. The knife found the insulation and the copper beneath it, and he applied pressure with the specific force required to cut through copper without slipping, and the wire parted with a sound like a small decision being made. The digital readout on the detonation unit across the room went dark. Not the whole unit. The unit still had power from the laptop connection, but the timer display, which had been counting when he'd come through the door, he'd clocked it at 9 minutes 40-something, went dark and stayed dark. He straightened up. He looked at his watch. From his phone call with Carver to now, 4 minutes, approximately, which left Carver with primary trigger capability and a 2-minute delay in the sequence, which meant the convoy on the highway had, if Noah's intelligence was accurate, a viable window to pull back out of the blast radius if the primary fired, if the convoy had stopped, if Cross had held the line. He pulled out his phone and dialed Cross's number. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. He dialed again. 3 rings. Grimm. Cross's voice, compressed and tight with something. "Did the convoy stop?" A pause that lasted too long. In the background, through the phone, Grimm could hear engines. Not motorcycle engines, something larger, diesel, and voices, multiple, overlapping. "They stopped," Cross said. "But Grimm." The south wall of the depot exploded. Not an explosion in the detonation sense, no fire, no pressure wave. The loading bay doors at the south end of the building crashed open with the force of a vehicle hitting them at speed, the metal sheeting crumpling inward and the lower track tearing free of the concrete, and a black pickup truck came through the opening and stopped in the bay with its headlights flooding the interior. The 3 men on the floor were moving before the doors finished falling. Grimm was already moving too, back toward the fire exit, the phone still in his hand, putting the table between himself and the truck. The headlights made long, hard shadows of everything in the room, the work light stands casting in opposition, and the geometry of shadows and light created a strobing confusion that took a half-second to read. The truck door opened. Carver got out. He looked different up close than he had at the fence. Larger, somehow, in the way that people who have become accustomed to consequence carry their size differently. He was wearing a dark jacket, and his gray hair was cut so close to his skull it was almost not there. He had a radio in one hand, and he set it on the roof of the truck before he walked forward, which was a specific and deliberate gesture, putting it down rather than keeping it, showing he hadn't used it yet, showing he was choosing this conversation over the button. That was the most dangerous thing he'd done since Grimm had arrived. "Mr. Mercer," Carver said. He looked at the detonation unit, at the dark readout, at the cut wire hanging from the battery case. His expression did not change in a way that was visible from 10 feet. "You're fast." "The secondary is dead," Grimm said. "I can see that." "You've still got the primary. The delay buys the convoy 2 minutes. Grimm held his position behind the table. "They're already stopping. Cross has them held south of the overpass." "I heard." Carver looked at him steadily. "The question is whether 2 minutes is enough. The primary fires, and we see." He picked up the radio from the truck roof, looking at it rather than at Grimm. "Or I don't fire it, and we have a different conversation." "We're having that conversation." "Are we?" He set the radio back down. "Here's the thing about that conversation. It requires you to believe that what I do next depends on what happens in the next 60 seconds. And it requires me to believe that you have something I need beyond what's already in motion." He paused. "What do you think you have, Mr. Mercer?" "The boy." Carver was quiet. "He's the only one who can find the storage unit. You've known that since you found out he existed." Grimm kept his voice even. "You don't have the files. You don't have the location. You have a bridge wired to drop a convoy, which stops the files from reaching the courthouse today. But it doesn't get you the files. It doesn't end it." He paused. "And right now, the boy is on the highway with a federal convoy, and 6 of my people and your window for collecting him quietly closed about 20 minutes ago." Something moved behind Carver's eyes. A recalculation. The kind that happens when a man who has been 3 steps ahead discovers that someone has been taking different steps. "He told you about the storage unit," Carver said. "He told me enough." "He doesn't know that we know about Flagstaff." A beat. "That's what you're not understanding. We've had the storage facility under surveillance for 6 weeks. We've been waiting for someone who knows the access sequence to approach it. We were waiting for the boy to go there." He paused. "We didn't need to catch him. We needed to follow him." The words landed with the specific quality of information that changes the shape of a room. Grimm processed it in 2 seconds. The surveillance on the storage unit, 6 weeks. Which meant, "The culvert," he said. "He was in an irrigation culvert for 2 days," Carver said. "We knew. We let him run because he was going to lead us there. We let him find your club because a frightened boy running to a group of bikers is less alarming to a federal escort than a frightened boy running to the courthouse." He paused. "Everything that happened today happened because we let it happen. We needed a vector we could control." Grimm looked at him. "The convoy was never the point," Carver said. "Disruption, delay, that's all it needed to be. The point is the storage unit. The point is the sequence in the boy's head." He looked at the radio. "I can fire the bridge. It doesn't matter whether the convoy escapes the radius or not anymore. The filing deadline for the primary case is 72 hours from now. The evidence on that convoy is secondary material. What matters is in Flagstaff." He looked back at Grimm. "And the boy is going to lead me there one way or another. The only question is whether your people are in the way when it happens." The loading bay was very quiet. The 3 men from the floor had repositioned, 2 near the truck, 1 to the right of Carver. Not drawing weapons. Not yet. But positioned. Grimm's phone, still in his hand, vibrated. He looked at it without lowering his gaze from Carver. A text from a number he didn't recognize. 7 digits, no country code. Formatted in a way that suggested it had been routed. The text read, "Depot East Perimeter, 30 seconds. He looked up. "Here's the thing about the vector you were trying to control," Grimm said. "You built it around a 16-year-old who watched his brother die and spent 2 nights in a drainage ditch and walked 11 hours across the desert to warn a group of strangers." He held Carver's gaze. "You can't control someone like that. You can only underestimate them." Something moved in Carver's expression, not quite uncertainty. The man was too calibrated for uncertainty. More like the look of someone who has just heard a word in a language they assumed they were fluent in that turns out to have a meaning they weren't taught. "What did he do?" Carver said. Outside, from the east, from the direction of the fence line, where 7 iron vultures had been holding the perimeter, came the sound of motorcycle engines opening up. Not idling, not the low rumble of engines at rest. The full throttle sound of machines being pushed, multiple engines in unison, the sound traveling through the desert air and the cinder block walls and arriving in the depot building as a physical fact. A vibration you felt in your sternum before you heard it with your ears. Carver's hand went to the radio. Grimm moved. He came over the table without thinking about it. Pure commitment, no calculation. the body executing a decision the mind had already made and filed. He covered the distance between himself and Carver in the time it takes a hand to close around a radio, and his left hand found Carver's right wrist and applied the specific torque that makes a grip release, and the radio hit the concrete floor. Carver was not slow. He was not undertrained. He responded with the economy of a man who has been in physical confrontations before and retained the musculature to handle them. A rotation of the hips, a redirect of Grimm's momentum, and they were both moving and neither of them was in control of the outcome, which was the most dangerous place a fight can be. They hit the south wall of the depot together. The cinder block was not forgiving. Grimm felt it across his shoulder blades and lost half a breath, and Carver used that half breath to create separation and reach for something at his hip, and Grimm's right hand found the wrist before the something cleared the holster, and they were locked again, shoulder to shoulder against the wall, breathing hard, neither moving. "The radio's on the floor," Grimm said between breaths. "The secondary's dead. Your people are about to have a very busy east perimeter." Carver's jaw was tight. His eyes were flat and working. "You're one man." "I keep hearing that." Grimm felt the man's wrist flexing against his grip. Controlled, testing, looking for the mechanical advantage that would flip the leverage. "I've got 14 bikes and a 16-year-old who's smarter than both of us." The east wall of the depot produced a sound that was not structural, not a collapse, not an impact, but the specific resonance of 7 motorcycle engines parking in tight formation outside a cinder block wall, followed by the silence that comes when they all shut down at once, followed by the sound of boots on gravel, multiple sets, moving with the unhurried pace of men who have arrived somewhere and are not leaving. Decker's voice came through the fire exit door, not shouting, carrying. "Grimm." A pause. "We've got the perimeter." Carver's wrist stopped testing. The 2 men by the truck looked at the fire exit door, then at each other, then at Carver, in the specific sequence of people whose decision tree has just had several branches removed. "We've also got a federal tactical vehicle on the access road," Decker continued from outside. "I think someone called ahead." Carver was very still against the wall. Grimm could feel the man's breathing, controlled even, the breathing of someone who is running calculations that are coming back with numbers he doesn't like. His eyes moved to the radio on the floor, then to the detonation unit with its dark readout, then to the fire exit door, then to Grimm. Something settled in Carver's face. Not defeat. The man was too controlled for anything as clean as defeat. More like the look of someone who has identified the exact moment at which a position became untenable and is in the process of filing it for future reference. "The storage unit," Carver said quietly. "He still has to go there." "He'll go when he's ready," Grimm said, "with the right people standing outside." "The right people." Carver's voice had a quality in it. Not quite bitter, not quite amused. Something between them. "You've known this boy for 4 hours. You don't know if the right people exist." "I know they're not you." A silence. Then, from outside the depot, something Grimm had not expected. Not from this direction, not in this moment. The sound of a single motorcycle arriving at the south end of the property, coming up the access road fast and then slowing. An engine he recognized. Not by make, by the specific frequency of it, the particular voice of a machine that had been tuned by the same hands for years and had developed the individual quality of long-maintained things. Noah. He thought, "I told him to stay on the highway." He thought, "Of course he didn't." The engine cut. Silence. Then boots on the access road gravel, lighter than the iron vultures moving quickly. Noah's voice from outside the south wall, through the gap where the loading bay doors had been. Grimm. "Here." He didn't take his eyes off Carver. "The convoy's holding. Vasquez's coordinator confirmed receipt, turf seat of the technical intelligence." A pause. "They want the boy for debriefing, federal protective custody." Another pause, with something careful in it. "Vasquez's team is clean. Ortega got me a secondary confirmation through a different channel. The mole is above her, not inside her unit." Grimm processed this. "The mole has a name," Noah said. "My brother put it in the files. It's in Flagstaff." Carver's eyes had changed. Not his expression. His eyes. Something behind them that had been calculating and patient and 2 steps ahead had shifted into a different register. The register of a man who has just understood something about the geometry of the situation that he hadn't understood before. He told you, Carver said. Not to Grimm. To the gap in the south wall, to Noah's voice. He told me everything, Noah said. A silence that had several layers in it. Then, the name, Carver said. His voice had lost its administrative quality, something rawer underneath. You actually know the name. Yes. Then you know that the name means Vasquez's unit has a ceiling problem, not a floor problem. You know that her tactical team has a case officer above them who... He stopped. He looked at Grimm. Does he understand what he's carrying? What it means if that name reaches the wrong recipient inside the federal structure? He understands, Grimm said. Does he understand that I'm not the only person who wants those files? That there are people with significantly more resources and significantly less patience who don't know about the truck stop today, but will know tomorrow? He paused. The boy needs protection that a group of bikers can't provide. Not because I'm underestimating you, Mr. Mercer. Because the next level of this isn't men with radios in a desert depot. It's something else. The loading bay was quiet. The work lights hummed. The shadows were exactly where they'd been. Grimm looked at Carver for a long 3 seconds. He thought about the word tomorrow, about the specific way Carver had said it, not as a threat, but as a fact. The voice of a man who has operated inside something large and has a specific and accurate sense of its scale. He thought about Noah on the highway, with the convoy call sign in his mouth, and his brother's sequence in his head, and the storage unit in Flagstaff, and the name that nobody had said out loud yet. He looked at the radio on the floor. He looked at the detonation unit with its dead readout. He looked at Carver. Pick up the radio, he said, slowly, and call it off. Carver looked at him for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes, the end of one set of calculations, the beginning of another. He reached down with deliberate care and picked up the radio from the concrete floor and pressed the transmit button and said 4 words in a flat, clear voice. 4 words that Grimm didn't catch completely. A code phrase, probably, specific and contextual, but whose effect was immediately audible in the change of sound outside the depot. Movement that had been tense going still, an engine somewhere that had been running going quiet. Carver lowered the radio. He looked at Grimm with the expression of a man who has made a strategic withdrawal and knows the word for what he's doing and is making peace with it. The convoy is safe, he said. The bridge won't fire. A pause. For now. For now, Grimm repeated. Tomorrow is a different problem. Carver's voice was very quiet. And the name in those files makes tomorrow arrive faster than you want it to. Outside the depot, through the gap in the south wall, through the gray Arizona air that had finally committed to rain, a thin, cold desert rain that arrived without ceremony. Grimm could hear the sound of the federal tactical vehicle on the access road, closer now, its engine a different register from the motorcycles. He could hear Decker's voice, giving instructions he couldn't make out, but whose authority was clear in their cadence. He could hear Noah, somewhere outside, saying something to someone in a voice that was no longer the voice of a boy who had been running for 11 hours. And under all of it, he could hear the rain on the cinderblock roof, starting quiet and building to something that would not be quiet for long, and the sound of 14 motorcycles sitting in the desert getting wet, and the specific silence of a bridge that was not going to fall today. Today. Carver's last words sat in the depot air like something that hadn't finished arriving yet. Tomorrow. Grimm looked at the man in front of him, at the flat gray eyes, the controlled bearing, the administrative calm of someone who loses one battle as a gesture toward winning the larger one, and understood with the specific clarity of a man who has been in enough long fights to recognize their shape that what had happened today was not an ending. It was a pause. And in the pause, somewhere in a storage unit in Flagstaff, under a name that a dead man had chosen carefully, a set of files was waiting, with a name inside them that nobody had said out loud yet. And outside, in the cold rain, a 16-year-old boy who had walked 11 hours and survived 2 nights in a culvert and warned 14 strangers and refused every instruction to stay back and stay safe was standing in the Arizona desert getting soaked, carrying that name in his head, the last piece of everything his brother had built. Waiting. For what came next? The rain came down without apology. It was the kind of desert rain that arrives late and stays longer than expected, thin and cold and relentless. turning the hard-packed dirt of the depot access road into something that took footprints and kept them. Grim stood in it for a moment after coming through the south wall gap and let it hit his face and didn't move. His shoulder was already tightening where the cinder block had found it. His knee was filing its formal protest about the sprint across the embankment. His hands were steady, which was the thing that mattered. Around him, the depot property was occupied in the specific way of an aftermath. Not chaotic, not celebratory, but the quiet, focused movement of people doing the necessary things after a situation has resolved into something that can be processed. 2 federal tactical agents in dark gear were inside the building with Carver's people. A third was on his radio near the command trailer, speaking in the clipped cadence of someone relaying verified intelligence up a chain that was several links longer than any of them could see from here. Decker was at the east fence with 3 of his people, watching the access road. He looked at Grim when Grim came out of the building and conducted the specific inventory that old partners conduct. A rapid visual assessment that starts at the head and ends at the feet and communicates itself as a single nod when the inventory comes back acceptable. Grim nodded back. Acceptable. Not good. Not clean. But standing. That was what acceptable meant out here. He looked around for Noah, found him 20 feet away on the south side of the property, sitting on the ground with his back against the cinder block wall, and his knees pulled up, and his face turned up into the rain with his eyes closed. Not sleeping, not unconscious. The posture of someone who has been moving continuously for a very long time and has just, in the last 60 seconds, received permission from their body to stop. Grim walked over and stood in front of him. Noah opened his eyes. They looked at each other for a moment without speaking, and in that moment Grim read something in the boy's face that he hadn't fully seen before. Not because it hadn't been there, but because the momentum of the day hadn't left room to look at it directly. It was the specific expression of someone who has been holding something alone for so long that the muscles required to hold it have become the dominant feature of their face, and who is now, in the first minutes after the weight has shifted, discovering what their face looks like without it. It looked younger. It looked like what it was, 16 years old. "The convoy's clear," Noah said. His voice was hoarse. "I know." Vasquez's coordinator called Cross. "They want me for debriefing. Formal statement." He paused. "Tonight." "That's going to happen," Grim said. "But not in the next 5 minutes." Noah looked at the rain, then back at Grim. "Carver said tomorrow is a different problem." "He's right." "The name in the files. The person above Vasquez's case officer." He stopped. "When that comes out, when it becomes public, when the people connected to it understand what's in those files, it's not going to be quiet." "No," Grim agreed. "It's not. I'll have to go somewhere." A pause. "Somewhere they put people who know things that other people don't want known." "Witness protection," Grim said. "Yeah." Noah said the word without inflection, which was the sound of someone who has had enough time with a hard reality to have stopped being surprised by it. "My brother used to say that the only thing more dangerous than a secret is a secret with a deadline." He looked up at the rain again. "I think today was the deadline." Grim crouched down so they were at the same level. It cost his knee something he'd pay interest on for a week. He did it anyway because some conversations require the people in them to be at the same elevation. "The files are going to get there," he said. "The name is going to come out. What your brother built, what you carried. It's going to do what he intended it to do. That doesn't unhappen." Noah was quiet for a moment. "He'd have wanted to be there for it." "I know. He'd have wanted to see—" He stopped again. His jaw tightened. He looked at the ground between his feet, at the wet dirt and the rain making small craters in it. He would have wanted to see it work. He spent 2 years building it. He wanted to see it work. Grim said nothing. He stayed at the same elevation and let the silence do what silence does when it's allowed to. After a moment, Noah looked up. "Did it work?" he said. Not rhetorical, genuinely asking. The question of a person who needs to hear it confirmed by someone who was there and saw the full shape of the day. Grim thought about the convoy holding south of the overpass, about the convoy's encrypted drives, intact, in federal hands, about the detonation unit with its dark readout and the cut wire hanging from the battery case, about Carver's radio on the concrete floor, about the text from Vasquez's coordinator that Cross had relayed, The single word confirmed that had come through when Noah had transmitted the convoy call sign on the federal frequency. It worked, Grimm said. Noah nodded. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just nodded, once, with the particular quality of a person receiving information they've needed for a long time, and finding that it lands differently than they expected, quieter, heavier, more like the end of something than the beginning. He pressed the back of his head against the cinder block wall and closed his eyes again. Grimm stood up slowly, with his knee making its feelings known in detail, and turned to find Decker at his elbow with 2 cups of coffee that had appeared from somewhere, the tactical vehicle probably, which turned out to have a thermos in it, which Grimm filed as evidence that federal preparation had improved since his last direct experience with it. He took the coffee. Decker kept the other. They stood in the rain and drank it. "Tuck?" Grimm said. "On his way to Flagstaff Medical with Rains driving." Decker's voice had the particular flatness of exhaustion passing itself off as calm. "Rains is unhappy about being separated from the situation. He expressed this." "What did you tell him?" "I told him Tuck's arm was the situation." "Good." He agreed eventually. Decker sipped his coffee. Harlan went with them. I think he needed something to do. Grimm considered that. Harlan, who had been guarded and watchful all afternoon, who had looked at the detonation photos with the recognition of a man fluent in a language he didn't want to still be speaking. Harlan, who had been assigned to Decker and gone without arguing, who had held the perimeter at the east fence for 45 minutes in the desert cold. Harlan, riding with Rains to the hospital to make sure Tuck's arm got looked at. Some people showed their loyalties by what they walked toward. Some showed them by what they refused to walk away from. "Cross," Grimm said. "On the highway with the convoy coordinator. They want his statement about the intercept. He's been on the phone with his Phoenix contact for 20 minutes. A pause. She apparently has strong opinions about several aspects of today. She's entitled. Cross agrees with you." Decker paused. "He also told me to tell you something." "What?" He said, Decker's voice shifted slightly, doing the work of accuracy. "Tell Grimm the south route would have been the wrong call." That's direct quote. Grimm looked at the overpass. Visible from here in the rain, the pale concrete catching the gray afternoon light, ordinary and intact and silent. No indication from looking at it of what it had been 3 hours ago. No indication of what had not happened on it. "Yeah," he said, "it would have been." They finished the coffee in silence. The rain was settling into its rhythm now, not letting up, not intensifying, just maintaining itself with the particular patience of desert rain that has decided to stay. Vasquez arrived at the depot 40 minutes after the tactical team, in a dark sedan with federal plates and the bearing of a woman who had spent the entire drive making phone calls she wouldn't discuss in company. She was in her mid-40s, with close-cropped dark hair, and the specific kind of tiredness in her face that isn't from the day, but from the year. The accumulated weight of working a case that kept finding new floors beneath its floors. She looked at the depot, at the command trailer, at the open fire exit door and the tactical team visible inside, at Carver, who was sitting in the back of the tactical vehicle with his wrists secured and his expression maintaining its administrative neutrality with impressive discipline. Then she looked at Grimm. "You cut the wire," she said. "Yes." "The backup timer." "Yes." She looked at the building for another moment. "We've been building this case for 8 months. We knew the convoy route was compromised. We knew someone had access to the case officer structure above my team. We didn't know the depot, the configuration, or the timeline." She paused. "We also didn't know about the storage unit in Flagstaff." "The boy knew," Grimm said. She looked at Noah, who had stood up from the wall when Vasquez arrived and was standing now with his hands at his sides in the rain, watching her with the careful attention of someone who has learned to read federal agents the way other people read weather. "Marcus Ryder," she said. Not to Grimm, to Noah. "Your brother?" "Yes." "I want you to know, and I need you to hear this clearly, we had a flag on his name. Not as a suspect, as a protected source who'd initiated contact through a channel we later found was compromised." Her voice was precise, and she chose each word with the care of someone who understands what accountability sounds like and is choosing to practice it. "He reached out to the right people. The right people turned out to be compromised. That's not..." That wasn't a failure we could see from inside the structure. She paused. It doesn't make it less of a failure. Noah looked at her for a long 3 seconds. He trusted the system, he said. I know. Once. Vasquez held his gaze. She didn't look away, didn't soften it, didn't offer anything that wasn't true. Yes, she said. He did. The rain fell between them. The tactical team moved in and out of the depot building carrying equipment in evidence bags. Somewhere in the distance, the highway was returning to its ordinary traffic, the convoy having cleared the overpass, which had been swept and cleared by a specialist team that Vasquez had deployed before she'd come to the depot, and resumed its route north with its encrypted drives and its documented testimony intact. The name, Noah said, in the files. Yes. You need me to take you to Flagstaff. I need you to take us to Flagstaff, Vasquez confirmed. With appropriate protection. Appropriate meaning my team specifically, with a chain of custody that I control and document. She paused. And I need you to understand what happens after. What it looks like. Where you go. I know what it looked like, Noah said. I've had time to think about it. How much time? Since the culvert. He said it plainly. I knew if I got the files to the right people, I'd disappear. That's how this works. My brother knew it too. He was trying to get me clear before it happened to him, and he ran out of time. He paused. I'm not running out of time today. Vasquez looked at him for a moment. She looked at Grimm, then back at Noah. Is there anyone, family, contact, anyone you need to? No, Noah said. The word was clean and final and carried its full weight in 3 letters. There's no one. The 3 of them stood in that for a moment. The rain didn't have any comment. Then Grimm said, Give us an hour. Vasquez looked at him. Before Flagstaff. Before debriefing. Before any of it. He held her gaze. Give us an hour. She studied his face for a long 3 seconds, reading something there that she apparently decided was trustworthy, because she nodded once and walked back toward the command trailer to continue her other 12 problems. Grimm turned to Noah. You hungry? Noah blinked. What? The Red Mesa Diner. They have bad coffee and they're still open. He looked at his watch. Probably. Something crossed Noah's face that he didn't fully catch before it arrived. A small, genuine, entirely unpracticed expression that was the closest thing to surprised laughter that a person can produce when they're too tired and too wrung out for actual laughter, but the impulse shows up anyway. Yeah, Noah said. I'm hungry. The Red Mesa Truck Stop Diner at 6:30 in the evening looked exactly like it had at 2:30 in the afternoon, which was part of its particular character. The same tired neon above the window. The same smell of burnt grease and old coffee that hit you at the door. The same waitress, her name tag said Darlene, who moved between tables with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had seen enough to have stopped being surprised by what kind of people walked through her door. She looked at the group that filed in. 7 iron vultures, road wet, one with a bandaged arm that Tuck would have objected to being reminded of if he'd been there, all of them carrying the particular quality of people who have recently been somewhere that left marks. And she looked at the boy in the middle of them with the electrical tape on his boot, and she said, Coffee? Please, Grimm said. Booths or counter? Booths. They took 2 booths and the counter between them, spreading into the space with the ease of people who have spent enough time together to know instinctively where everyone fits without having to discuss it. Grimm took the booth nearest the window with Decker across from him. Noah slid in beside Grimm with the naturalness of someone who has found the orientation point in the room and moved toward it. Cross came in last, phone finally in his pocket, and dropped into the counter stool with the expression of a man who has been on hold with the universe for several hours and has just been told his call has been answered. Darlene brought coffee in a pot that had been there since morning and poured it without asking and left the pot. Nobody complained about the quality, which had not improved since the afternoon's assessment of it. They sat with the coffee and the rain on the window and the diner sounds around them, the hiss of the grill in the back, the low country radio that nobody had turned off, the particular ambient noise of a place that exists at the edge of everything and keeps running anyway. Nobody talked for a while. That was fine. That was the right thing. Grimm wrapped both hands around the coffee cup and felt the warmth of it against his palms, and his bad knee throbbed its steady complaint. and the shoulder where the cinder block had found him was tightening towards something that would be genuinely unpleasant by morning. He inventoried these things and set them in the category of things that proved the day had been real and let them stay there. Cross said, from the counter, "My daughter called." Nobody asked what she said. The fact of it was sufficient. "Told her I was running late," Cross continued. He looked at his coffee. "She said she figured." A pause. "She always figures." "How old is she now?" Decker asked. 14. Cross paused. 14 in November. Grimm thought about a 14-year-old girl in Phoenix waiting for her father to come home late, which he apparently did enough that she'd learned to expect it. He thought about what it costs a man to be the kind of man he is, and where those costs land when they don't land on him. He thought about this and didn't say any of it, because Cross already knew it and had been living with it and didn't need it named. Darlene came back with menus. Noah took one and looked at it with the focused attention of someone for whom the act of choosing food from a menu has not been available in recent memory and is therefore both simple and significant. "What's good?" he asked Darlene. She looked at him over her order pad with the expression of someone who has been asked this question 10,000 times and has developed a policy about it. "The burger," she said. "Don't get the fish." "Burger," Noah said. "Fries?" "Yeah." She wrote it down and looked at Grimm. "Same," he said. She went around the table and the counter in that way and came back for the pot and refilled cups that were only half empty, which Grimm had noticed was her system. She refilled constantly, never let anyone reach the bottom, so the coffee was always there when you needed it without having to ask. He appreciated the specific thoughtfulness of that. "Grimm." Noah's voice was quiet, directed at the window rather than at Grimm. "Yeah." "The vest. At the Iron Vultures clubhouse." He paused. "What Carver said. About tomorrow being a different problem." He turned from the window. "There's going to be more of it. After the name comes out. After the files go into evidence and the case officer above Vasquez gets identified, and it's going to come apart slowly. These things come apart slowly. And while they're coming apart, the people who want them to stay together are going to keep looking for the parts they haven't secured yet." I know, Grimm said. "I'm the part they haven't secured. You're the part Vasquez's protective program secures." Grimm looked at him. "That's different from being unsecured." "It's not that different." He said it without self-pity, as a logistical observation. "Protective programs are structures. Structures have ceilings." Carver said. "Carver is in the back of a federal vehicle," Grimm said. "His assessment of your vulnerability is not our primary reference point anymore." A beat. "But he's not the only one who knows," Noah said. "No." Grimm didn't pretend otherwise. "He's not." Darlene brought the food. The burgers were larger than anticipated, and the fries were the kind that came from a bag, but had been in the fryer long enough to achieve an honest result. Noah ate with the same focused urgency as the afternoon sandwich, but different now. Less desperate, more deliberate. The body having a conversation with itself about what normal felt like. Around the table, people ate in the comfortable partial silence of shared food among people who have been through something together, which is one of the few genuinely reliable forms of comfort available to human beings. And Grimm was aware of this and let it do its work. It was Harlan who came through the diner door at 7:15, having evidently left Rains with Tuck at the hospital and driven back, which was a thing nobody had asked him to do and which he offered no explanation for. He came in wet from the rain and looked around the booths and counter and found an empty stool and sat down, and Darlene poured coffee without being asked, and he wrapped his hands around the cup and looked at nothing for a moment. Then he looked at Noah. "I was wrong about you," Harlan said. Directly. No construction around it. Noah looked at him. "In the parking lot. When I said I'd known people who tell convincing stories." Harlan held the boy's gaze with the discomfort of a man doing a thing that doesn't come easily, but that he's decided to do anyway. "I was wrong." Noah was quiet for a moment. "You didn't know me," he said. "Still." "You were careful," Noah said. "My brother was careful too. He checked everything 3 times before he trusted it." He paused. "Being careful isn't the same as being wrong." Harlan looked at his coffee. Something in his face did something private and then returned to stillness. He nodded once. Nobody else commented on this. It had happened and been witnessed and was sufficient. After the food, when the plates had been cleared and the coffee had been refilled twice more, Grim reached into the inside pocket of his cut and took out something he'd been carrying since before the truck stop. A length of leather cord with a small metal ring threaded onto it, the kind of thing that gets acquired on the road and kept because it has the right weight and feel even when you don't yet know what it's for. He set it on the table in front of Noah. Noah looked at it. "What's this?" "It's a piece of leather and a ring," Grim said. "I can see that. When you're somewhere safe, when this is done and the case is made and the name is in the record where it belongs." He paused. "Come find the Iron Vultures. We ride out of Flagstaff the third Saturday of every month. Red Mesa is on the route." He looked at Noah steadily. "Not because we need you there. Because you're the one who warned us. That means something to us. It means something in a specific way that has consequences, which is that it doesn't go away." Noah looked at the leather cord. He picked it up, turned it in his fingers. The metal ring caught the diner light. He looked up at Grim with an expression that had come from somewhere behind all the other expressions. Behind the flat steadiness and the exhausted precision and the 16-year-old carrying his brother's last words across the Arizona desert. An expression that was simpler and more undefended than any of them, and that lasted maybe 3 seconds before the steadiness came back over it, like water settling. "Okay," he said. He put the cord in his pocket. Outside, the rain had not stopped, but it had gone quieter. Not the steady pressure of an hour ago, but the intermittent drip of something winding down, the desert beginning to absorb what had been given to it. The highway was audible through the diner window, the sound of ordinary traffic on an ordinary Tuesday evening, trucks and sedans and the occasional motorcycle, the world having decided that whatever had happened today was over and it was time to resume. Vasquez came into the diner at 7:40. She stood at the door for a moment, looking at the assembled scene. Bikers in booths and at the counter, coffee cups, empty plates, the rain-wet road outside, the boy sitting beside the road captain of the Iron Vultures with a piece of leather cord in his pocket. And she let herself look at it for a full 3 seconds before she spoke. "It's time," she said to Noah. Gently, which was a word Grim hadn't expected to associate with her, but that turned out to be accurate. Noah nodded. He slid out of the booth. He stood in the diner aisle for a moment and looked at the group. At Grim, at Decker, at Cross on his stool, at Harlan, at the others, and he conducted his own inventory of the room with those careful, accurate eyes that had been mapping everything since the parking lot. He said nothing. There wasn't anything that needed to be said. The day had already said it. He turned and walked toward the door, and Vasquez held it open, and at the threshold Noah stopped for one moment and looked back over his shoulder. "The coffee's terrible," he said. "Always is," Grim said. Noah walked out into the rain. Vasquez let the door close behind them. Through the window, Grim watched the federal sedan pull out of the truck stop lot and take the South Highway ramp, heading toward Flagstaff, heading toward a storage unit with a dead man's files and a name that was going to change the shape of something large and slow and currently unaware of what was coming for it. He watched until the taillights disappeared around the highway curve. Then he turned back to the table. Decker had his coffee cup halfway raised and was looking at the window with an expression of quiet and contained satisfaction. The expression of a man who has done a thing that cost something and has decided the cost was appropriate. Cross was looking at his phone, which had a photo on it that Grim could see from across the counter. A girl with Cross's jawline, and presumably her mother's eyes, school photo quality, 14 years old in November. He was looking at it with the look of a man recalibrating what the next phase of his life is going to look like. Harlan was drinking his coffee. The country radio played something that nobody recognized. Darlene came by with the pot. "More?" she said. "Please," Grim said. She poured. She moved on. Grim wrapped his hands around the cup and felt the warmth of it and looked out the window at the wet highway and the pale overpass in the distance, lit now by the sodium lights that had come on at dusk, ordinary and intact against the dark Arizona sky. The rain was almost done. The desert air after rain has a specific quality, clean and cold and carrying the smell of wet creosote, which is one of the few smells that is exactly what it should be and no more. He thought about a 16-year-old in a federal sedan riding north toward Flagstaff with a piece of leather cord in his pocket. I thought about a dead man who had spent 2 years building something in the dark and had sent the map to the only person he trusted and had run out of time before he could see what it built. He thought about what it means to warn people, the specific courage required to run towards strangers with a truth that nobody wants to hear, to keep saying it even when nobody's listening, to stand in the middle of a parking lot in electrical tape boots and say, "You're all in danger," and to be right. Outside, a single motorcycle passed on the highway. Not one of theirs, someone else entirely, a single headlight moving south through the dark, wet night. The engine sound arriving and departing in under 10 seconds, there and gone. One more person in transit between one place and another on roads that would look exactly the same tomorrow and nothing like the same underneath. The Iron Vultures sat in the Red Mesa diner until close to 9 o'clock. They didn't talk much. They drank the bad coffee and ate a second round of things that came from a bag and listened to the radio play songs that were mostly about other people's troubles. They sat in the specific comfort of people who have been through the same day and don't need to explain it to each other. When they finally got up to leave, Darlene was wiping down the counter, and she looked at them without particular expression as they filed out. And as Grimm passed, she said, "You boys all right?" He thought about the question. He thought about the honest answer, which was complex and had several layers and would take a while to fully arrive at. "Getting there," he said. She nodded like that was the expected answer and went back to her counter. Outside, the rain had stopped. The parking lot was wet and dark, and the neon of the truck stop reflected off every puddle in smeared pink and yellow. The bikes sat where they'd been left, wet with rain, the chrome catching the light. Grimm stood beside his bike and looked at the highway, at the overpass and the sodium light, at the dark desert beyond it, stretching out flat and patient and entirely indifferent to everything that had happened on top of it today. Decker appeared beside him. "Tomorrow," Decker said. "Yeah. It's actually a problem. I know. The name in those files, when it comes out. I know. It's going to make some people very uncomfortable in very specific places. I know." Grimm paused. "But tonight it's still in a storage unit in Flagstaff, and the boy is safe, and the convoy made it through, and Tuck's arm is going to be fine." He looked at Decker. "Tonight, that's what's true." Decker considered this. "Yeah," he said. "Tonight, that's what's true." Grimm swung onto his bike. The engine started on the first turn, the same as it always did. The particular voice of a machine that had been well maintained and was prepared to do the next thing required of it. Around him, one by one, the other engines started, each with its own voice, its own frequency, the formation assembling itself in the wet parking lot the way it always did. Without instruction, without performance, just the accumulated habit of men who had been riding together long enough that the formation was as natural as breathing. He put the bike in gear. He looked one more time at the Red Mesa truck stop, the neon, the diner window with Darlene's figure moving behind it, the pumps standing in their steady yellow light. The place that looked exactly the same as it had this morning, and would look exactly the same tomorrow, and had, for the 6 hours between those two moments of sameness, been the place where a frightened boy ran toward strangers and a road captain laughed, and then stopped laughing, and then did the necessary thing. He pulled out of the lot. 14 bikes took the South Highway ramp, heading toward Flagstaff, toward the long, familiar roads that ran between the things that mattered, through the dark, wet Arizona night, with the stars coming out above the rain-cleared air, one by one, the way they always did out here, where the sky had room for all of them. The engines found their rhythm together. The road opened ahead, straight and dark and exactly as long as it needed to be. And the Iron Vultures rode.